This is my favorite part. Settlers were even caught on tape accusing the IDF of being Hamas.
They're religious zealots, and they think that God gave them that land, so they get to murder the Palestinians on the land to take it because God whispered in their ear about how they murder, and it's okay, God's on your side. And they're just Palestinians, murder their babies. They're terrorists. They're the bigots. They're nuts. They're lunatics. So get real about who the frickin' settlers are, some of the worst people on earth.
Palestinians in Kafr Malik hold funerals for 3 of their own on Thursday, a day after Jewish settlers attacked the West Bank village in their dozens as the residents tried to defend themselves. As the cleanup continued, they say they were taken by surprise.
No fewer than 70 to 80 settlers took part. They entered the area and scattered among most of the houses within 5 minutes. At first, they started with the car, broke the windows and then burned it. A settler came to the house here. The window shutter was open, he broke the glass and threw a firebomb. There was a 1-month-old baby girl sleeping in the bed.
Last week, more than 100 Israeli settlers launched a violent attack on Palestinians in the West Bank in the town of Kafr Malik, setting property on fire and even shooting at Palestinians who tried to stop them from doing so. Now, right-wing Israeli violence in the West Bank has gone so far that they have even begun attacking Israeli security forces in the area. And before we get to all the details about that unbelievable twist, we do have to start with the settlers' horrific attack on this town where at least 7 illegal settler outposts have gone up in recent months. And I just want to remind you all that the Israeli government even announced some months ago, I think it was last month, that they intend on building 22 new illegal settlements in the West Bank. So we shouldn't be surprised by any of this. This was already pre-announced. This is a plan that's been in the works. They're going to annex the entirety of the West Bank. That's what they plan to do.
That's Miriam Adelson's plan. She's the one that bribed Donald Trump. Her family's bribed him, giving campaign contributions of $337 million. So
That's
how bribery works in America. I'm gonna go off on the settlers in a second, who are pretty much the worst people on earth.
They are.
Okay,
yes. So let's get to some of these details. So dozens of Israelis descended on this village near Ramallah by foot and in vehicles. The attackers hurled Molotov cocktails and set homes and cars on fire. They allegedly tried to break into people's homes. I don't even want to say allegedly because there's plenty.
No, there's
video
right
evidence of it,
yeah.
right? A firebomb was thrown into a bedroom where a newborn was being put to sleep. Luckily, the mom and baby survived that attack. And soon after the attack began, Israeli forces arrived and opened fire at Palestinians instead of going after the rioters, the settlers. They accused villagers of shooting at them, which no witnesses corroborated. Very likely because it's untrue. And the soldiers killed 3 people, according to the Palestinians. The Palestinian Health Ministry. A 35-year-old, an 18-year-old, and a 15-year-old. Now remember, we're talking about the West Bank. We're not talking about Gaza here. So the West Bank was not governed by Hamas. So you can't argue that Hamas is using people as human shields in this case. But the fact that any of these terrorists were held even slightly accountable infuriated the settlers. And so they set off a chain of confrontations between them and Israeli security forces in the area. Soldiers shot and wounded an Israeli teenager on Friday during a clash with the settlers. So let's get into those details in just a minute. First, brief comment from Cenk.
Yeah, so I was debating an Israeli supporter on a program called Counterpoints earlier today. And he started describing this apocalyptic religious zealots who wouldn't hesitate to kill civilians. And I'm like, you mean Israeli settlers? Because he was talking about theoretically the Iranian regime, but Iran is not starting wars, Israel's starting wars. So, but it's always projection. So these settlers are nuts. They're religious zealots, and they think that God gave them that land, so they get to murder the Palestinians on the land to take it because God whispered in their ear about how they murder, and it's okay, God's on your side. And they're just Palestinians, murder their babies. They're terrorists. and they came in to steal the land in the first place, and they say, no, we're not stealing it because it's Judea and Samaria. Anyone who says Judea and Samaria is basically saying, I'm a terrorist who'd like to steal Palestinian land, and I don't mind murdering Palestinians to do it. Because there is no other explanation for, hey, the entire international community says West Bank and Gaza Strip should be part of a two-state solution and become independent Palestine. And the settlers go, no, I want the land because my murderous God in their fantasies said that I should murder the Muslims and take their land.
But by the way,
you're a religious zealot lunatics. So I'm not interested, like in the old days, you couldn't even say like things that are factual about the settlers because people would be like, anti-Semite. Of course they get to murder Muslims. Of course they do. No, they don't. They don't. They're the bigots. They're nuts. They're lunatics.
Yeah.
And so they cause more war, more problems, more deaths than almost anyone on the planet. So get real about who the frickin' settlers are. Some of the worst people on earth.
So this past Sunday, as the Associated Press reports, dozens of Israeli settlers rioted around a military base in the Israeli-occupied West Bank, setting fires, vandalizing military vehicles, spraying graffiti, and attacking soldiers. Again, we're talking about Israeli on Israeli violence here. We're talking about settlers attacking, Israeli security forces. The Israeli military said that the infrastructure burned in the attack included systems that help thwart terrorist attacks and maintain security.
The only terrorists in the West Bank are the settlers. Okay, so let's get real about who the terrorists are. And you understand why they're rioting against the IDF? Because the IDF showed up and only murdered 3 innocent Palestinians. They were trying to burn the whole village down.
That's exactly right, yes.
And then they're like, what are you stopping us for? We were gonna murder all of them.
But by the way, IDF has been providing cover for the crimes committed by these settlers for how many years?
Endlessly.
For how many years? So you've created a monster. Now revel in it, enjoy. This is what you have enabled. You just thought that it would never turn around and impact the IDF or Israeli security forces. They were just under the assumption that the only people who would be terrorized, the only people who would be run out of their own homes would be Palestinians. And by the way, there are also, Christians living in the occupied West Bank as well who also get terrorized by these people. But they were under the assumption those are the only people who are gonna be victimized. We don't have to worry about any Israeli dealing with these unhinged terrorists who have been raining terror on people living in the West Bank for many years now.
One quick point. So Bethlehem is the home of Jesus, of course, and Christians live there. There's a church there. That church has been attacked before by settlers. And so they're not just attacking Muslims. They're saying Judea and Samaria, God told us, is Jewish settler land, and you Christians need to get out of here. You Muslims need to get out of here, otherwise we're gonna kill you all on behalf of our God. I mean, there isn't any bigger terrorists in the world than those Israeli settlers who are constantly attacking Christian and Muslim Palestinians because they think God told them to steal their land.
So look, 6 suspects were allegedly apprehended and then transferred to the police in Israel. But this is my favorite part. Settlers were even caught on tape accusing the IDF of being Hamas. Let's watch. You guys eventually are gonna have to find a new scapegoat. Like blaming Hamas for everything is kind of amazing.
No,
it's
that was
kind
perfect.
of amazing.
That was
like,
perfect.
wow.
No, I love that video. Good, attack each other more. Like 2 of the worst forces on earth. And the settlers somehow miraculously worse than the IDF, right? And to the settlers, they're such lunatics. They think the IDF is Hamas.
It's amazing, it really is.
You know when your propaganda has gone too far is when you think the IDF is Hamas. And let me guess, the IDF is anti-Semitic, right? Okay, look, I hope they do a 2-state solution, and this is the one time I'll cheer for the IDF. By the way, if Israel becomes a safe haven for Jews who have a 2-state solution, they don't attack anyone anymore and stop taking land, then I'll be super happy with the IDF, right? Okay, but the one time I'll cheer for them is if they do a two-state solution and they grab those settlers and then drag them back into Israel, that is going to be a beautiful thing to see.
Yeah,
I can't wait for that. I don't know that I'll ever see it in my lifetime.
You won't. So look, Netanyahu and
because by the way, the Israeli government supports terrorists. That's why I'm not going to see it in my lifetime. That's why they keep encouraging them by giving them 22 new settlements, because they love terrorists as long as they're murdering Muslims and Christians.
Remember, the IDF in the West Bank is there to protect the settlers as they are running Palestinians out of their homes, as they're burning villages. That's typically what happens. Now look, Netanyahu and even Itamar Ben-Gvir, a convicted terrorist, literally, publicly claimed to condemn the settler attacks on the IDF, likely because attacks on IDF soldiers, Haaretz West Bank correspondent Hagar Shezaf said, are obviously always controversial in Israeli society, but attacking Palestinians, not so controversial anymore. Opposition leader,
like it was ever.
It never was. Let's just be clear about that. Opposition leader Yair Lapid told Israel's army radio that the riots were carried out by Jewish terrorists, gangs of criminals who feel backed by the governing coalition, because they've been backed by the governing coalition. Let's be real about that.
You know what? Look, we're experiencing this a little bit. My family members are in Turkey, okay? Because Erdogan started letting in a lot more Muslim fundamentalists from Afghanistan, from Syria, from other places. And what it's doing is, Turkey's a very secular country, so it's starting this huge conflict within the country. Not starting, it's been now for a while. And so the secular group feels impinged upon by the fundamentalists. And the fundamentalists are like, what do you mean? God told us X, Y, Z. Well, fundamentalists from every religion believe that the God whispered in their ear that they're the Baghdadis, right? And everybody else is inferior to them and should serve them, right? So now Israel, you're not getting it. If you're a secular person in Israel, a citizen, you think they're just gonna stop at the Palestinians? No, fundamentalists are nuts. They're gonna come for you next. That's why they're calling the IDF Hamas. You think that once they get to be the majority, and yes, fundamentalists in all the different religions have more kids, okay? Once they get to be the majority in Israel, if you think Israel's bad now, and if you think Israel's bad for Palestinians, no, it's gonna be terrible for secular Jews in Israel. Terrible. You think these guys won't rip you apart and call you Hamas? All right, wait for it.
Yeah, well, enjoy the monster that you've nurtured. Now, Israeli law enforcement rarely holds settlers accountable for their criminal behavior. And that's why we have arrived at the day that you see the settlers attacking IDF soldiers. Now, Yesh Din, an Israeli rights group that examined more than 1,600 cases of settler violence in the West Bank between 2005 and 2023, found that just 3% ended in a conviction. And finally, settler attacks injured more than 220 Palestinians during the first 5 months of 2025, the highest rate in years, according to the United Nations. Settlers killed a Palestinian man on June 19th, the UN says. Hundreds of Palestinians, by the way, have been killed in the West Bank since the beginning of the genocide in Gaza. Starting in October of 2023. And so that's what we're dealing with here. These are unhinged lunatics who have been able to behave the way they've been behaving, violently, with impunity. And when you tell people engaging in bad behavior over and over again that it's totally fine, continue engaging in said bad behavior, don't be surprised when that bad behavior turns around and starts attacking you, because that's what's happening right now.
Israel's latest airstrikes in Gaza have caused multiple casualties. Some of the dead were from one family, killed in an encampment for the displaced in the Al-Mawasi area. Children were also among the victims.
They bombed us while we are sleeping on the ground. We didn't do anything wrong. 2 of my children have died, and the rest are in intensive care. There's no flour, no supplies, no food or water. We are moving from one place to another. What have we done to deserve this?
Well, as the carnage against Palestinians in Gaza continues, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has announced another round of evacuations in northern Gaza in order to carry out a new offensive. of course, as this genocide continues. So it's all likely because he wants to continue postponing his corruption trial. And unfortunately, the courts in Israel have granted him another 1-week postponement. Now, his tactic, again, has worked for now. Let's watch.
Benjamin Netanyahu will be convening his security cabinet. He was supposed to be in court this week on the stand in a long-running, often delayed corruption trial. He's accused of charges including bribery and fraud. He denies them all. Judges agreed he could be excused on diplomatic and security grounds for now. Israeli officials are heading to the White House today for talks on Gaza and Iran. President Trump has called on Israel to, quote, make the deal in Gaza.
Well, the postponement for now is just a technical thing. Netanyahu, the trial after 5 years is at a stage where Netanyahu has taken the stand and he's now answering the questions of the prosecution. So it's an uncomfortable stage of the trial for him. But he's already in that stage, and the postponement now is just a week after the judges have been convinced by the heads of Israeli security branches that there's something very important that the Prime Minister needs to deal with, and therefore they have to wait until they resume the trial.
Yeah, well, the courts need to stop giving him postponements, because if he's going to continue using the genocide that he's carrying out in Gaza as an excuse to continue postponing his corruption trial, he's going to keep the genocide going. And that's what has been happening since the very beginning of this war. Massacres of Palestinians at the hands of the Israeli Defense Forces have been ramped up in recent days. In fact, just today, at least 60 people across Gaza were killed in heavy Israeli attacks. A journalist was among those who were killed in Gaza City specifically. The Gaza Health Ministry also says that at least 81 Palestinians have been killed and more than 400 injured in Israeli strikes across Gaza in the 24 hours until midday on Saturday. In one incident, at least 11 people, including children, of course, were killed after a strike near a stadium in Gaza City. Al-Shifa hospital staff and witnesses told news agencies the stadium was being used to house displaced people living in tents. So the IDF continues bombing, literally like these tent encampments, because Palestinians have been displaced. Nearly every single residential building has been bombed. It's a complete and utter disaster. And on one hand, you have Trump claiming, I want a ceasefire deal, ceasefire now. Well, why did you approve another weapons package for Israel to the tune of $510 million? And I can get into the details about those weapons in just a moment, but you can't on one hand call for an end to the war, and then on the other hand, continue rewarding Israel with endless weaponry, paid for by US taxpayers, by the way.
Yeah, that's because he's negotiating with the donor class. He's saying, look, I made him stop attacking Iran. Okay, then I'll give you something in return. I'll give you $500 million in war. But wait, why do we have to give them anything? They're taking money from us. They're asking for help. They're asking to drive us into war. What do we get back? And the answer is always absolutely nothing. Nothing but grief and enemies and a stain on our nation's history for financing a genocide. But Trump's negotiating. But who's he negotiating with? He's already the president of the United States. Apparently there are people that are more powerful than the president. That's why Trump's like, okay. I'm so sorry for making you stop bombing Iran. Here's a $500 million gift, right?
Yeah.
Etc. Okay, so now you're saying, all right, look, I get it. Gaza's a slaughterhouse. Israel's killing people almost for sport now. We reported last week about how they're playing Squid Games, red version and Israeli version of red light, green light. And the operation is named after it. It's called Salted Fish, and the operation is Operation Salted Fish. Okay, so it's now just like beyond disgusting. Everyone that keeps killing in Gaza are going to go straight to a museum one day. They're all going to be in some sort of genocide remembrance museum. I hope 100%. To God one day Smotrich and Ben Gvir, let alone Netanyahu, are arrested. So we'll come back to that. But I want to talk about Smotrich because it's critical to what you're seeing today. If you're saying, yeah, I got it. It's like they do bombing all the time. But why bombing northern Gaza again? Because they're trying to drive people into the south. Why are they trying to drive them to the south? Well, that brings me to this quote from Smotrich from the Times of Israel. Within a few months, Smotrich says, we will be able to declare that we have won. Gaza will be totally destroyed. And he says, in another 6 months, Hamas won't exist as a functioning entity. Oh, good, then you have no reason to be there, right? No, he continues, the population of Gaza will be concentrated from the Morag corridor southwards. The rest of the strip will be empty. He then adds, the Gazan citizens will be concentrated in the south. They'll be totally despairing, understanding there is no hope and nothing to look for in Gaza, and will be looking for relocation to begin a new life in other places.
This is the country, by the way, that has a clandestine nuclear weapons program. They have nuclear weapons. They're not part of the non-proliferation agreement. They are currently engaged in genociding Palestinians in Gaza. They plan on annexing the entirety of the West Bank, a territory that belongs to the Palestinian people. And they have the audacity to talk about what a threat Iran is when Iran has shown on multiple occasions a level of restraint that blows my mind. Okay, Israel bombs the Iranian embassy in Syria. How does Iran respond? They wait a few days and then they hit up Trump, they hit up the Israeli government, and they let them know we're gonna do a theater, essentially, make it appear like we're retaliating. But here's where the missiles are gonna go, so you can strike them down. Okay, you have the United States, doing Israel's dirty work in bombing Iran nuclear facilities. And how does Iran respond? Okay, we're gonna retaliate, but it's all gonna be pretend. We're gonna target these US bases in the Middle East, but we're gonna warn you ahead of time so no one gets hurt, so we can at least make it appear as though we're retaliating for our people. Like, I'm sorry, but I'm getting really tired of hearing about how the genocidal country of Israel is the good country, the moral country, the country that should have illegal, nuclear weapons that they don't even acknowledge. And the ones that we should worry about the most are the Iranians because they do chants that we don't like. Get out of here.
Look, you could
get out of here.
You could deny this if you're an Israel supporter, but I don't even think Israel supporters would overly deny it.
Israel's a threat, okay? The real threat.
Hold on.
Yeah, go ahead.
The country most likely to use a nuke is overwhelmingly Israel.
100%.
Because look, the reason why I say a lot of Israel supporters would also agree is, my God, if they're slightly in danger, they're gonna press that button so quick, okay? I mean, you know it. Look, Iran is in danger all the time, constantly bombed by Israel, America, etc. So many other countries that are in danger and they don't use those. Now, Iran doesn't have nukes, so they couldn't use them anyway, right? But the minute Israel gets jittery, they're gonna press that button. By far the most likely to use it because they have a population and a government that is deeply, deeply paranoid. They think the whole world hates them and they have to attack first before anyone even thinks about attacking them.
The whole world does hate them.
But because of this genocide.
Because of this.
Right.
Okay, I'm so, how are you gonna put yourself in the position of poor little victims when they're slaughtering tens of thousands of innocent people, not feeling any remorse about it whatsoever? You literally have people in the Israeli government who don't believe there's a single innocent person in Gaza.
Yeah.
They think they're all violent, dangerous terrorists. But honestly, who are the terrorists here? When you're just slaughtering all these children willy-nilly. Haaretz reported today, 17,000 children slaughtered in Gaza so far.
Yeah, no, there's no question. The Israeli government is definitely more dangerous. It's, by the way, also more religious nut jobs. Part of the reason I hate the Iranian regime is because they're fundamentalist nut jobs, right? But are they crazier than Smotrich and Ben-Gvir? No way. No way, because Ben-Gvir and Smotrich are proven genocidal religious maniacs. Whereas we're worried that the Ayatollah is someone who could commit a lot of violence and is a religious maniac, right? But okay, so by the way, one of our members made a really good point last week. They said, so let me get this right. In this ceasefire negotiations, Iran is asking that Israel also stop attacking Gaza. That's their #1 ask.
Yeah. So
they're asking on behalf of another people. By the way, the Palestinians aren't even Shia like the Iran is. They're Sunni. They're on behalf of a rival sect. They're saying, can you please stop murdering those people? What is Israel asking? That Trump support Bibi Netanyahu in his corruption charges.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
I mean, it gives you a sense of morality. I'm not defending the Iranian regime. I'm just showing you how much more despicable the Israeli regime is. And so you can cry about it, and you can do propaganda, but Israel attacked Iran. Israel is the one that has attacked almost all of its neighbors. Iran not only got attacked by Israel, America, they also got attacked by Iraq. Yep. And back then, we were on Iraq's side. And Iraq used biological and chemical weapons on Iran. Iran has been attacked and attacked and attacked while our lying mainstream media and our lying politicians told you Iran is dangerous, evil. They're the real problem. That's why we should murder them first, right? Yeah. Stupid warmongers. So now, lastly, back to this story here about how Israel's driving them to the south. So if you're wondering, hey, in most of these stories, Israel's not even, like sometimes they pretend to have targeted a Hamas guy. A lot of times they don't even give almost all the time they never give a name. They're like, yeah, there was some militant in the area. And then they just murder a bunch of children and families. And if you're wondering why, like do they just like killing kids? No, they're bombing the families to drive them to the south so they could finish the Smotrich plan, which is to make life in Gaza so unbearable through murder and starvation that they could push them into the Sinai desert and take all of Gaza for greater Israel. Now that's from the river to the sea, but actually done and executed and planned by our beloved ally, the moral army, okay? No, the disgusting government of Israel that is trying to add ethnic cleansing on top of their daily terrorism against Palestinian civilians and children.
And for Israelis or Israel defenders who want to come at me for working on a show called The Young Turks as if you give a damn about the Armenian people, let's just be abundantly clear about which country supplied the weapons to Azerbaijan to engage in their ethnic cleansing of ethnic Armenians in Nagorno-Karabakh. It was Israel, of course.
Of course.
So please don't even try to come at me as if Israelis give a damn about the Armenian people, because they don't. Israelis care about Israelis, end of story.
What are you gonna talk to Netanyahu about next Monday?
Well, he's coming here. We're going to talk about a lot of things. We're going to talk about the great success we had. I mean, we had an incredible, in Iran, we had an incredible success. It was a great, brilliant strike, and how to go forward. We're also going to talk about Gaza. We want to get the rest. We got a lot of hostages back, but we're going to talk about Gaza.
Well, ahead of yet another meeting with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, President Donald Trump announced that he has helped broker a new agreement for a ceasefire, a 60-day ceasefire, which is just a pause in a genocide. And he claims that Israel has agreed to this ceasefire. But have they? Because right now, I think that your expectations should be tempered if you're excited about a ceasefire being agreed upon. Now, on Truth Social yesterday, Trump posted the following: my representatives had a long and productive meeting with the Israelis today on Gaza. Israel has agreed to the necessary conditions to finalize the 60-day ceasefire, during which time we will work with all parties to end the war. The Qataris and Egyptians, who have worked very hard to help bring peace, will deliver this final proposal. I hope, for the good of the Middle East, that Hamas takes this deal, because it will not get better. It will only get worse. Thank you for your attention to this matter. Okay, how could it get any worse than every single building being bombed, every single hospital being completely and utterly destroyed, tens of thousands of innocent civilians being killed? I mean, how does it get worse than luring innocent, starving Palestinians to humanitarian aid hubs only to shoot and kill them as they try to get their hands on some food to feed themselves and their families? How does it get worse than that? I mean, when it comes to the Israelis and the Israeli government, I totally believe that it can get worse. So I'll just take Trump's word for it. But nonetheless, this idea that Israel has agreed to a ceasefire is false, okay? So administration sources said that the deal was finalized after months of behind-the-scenes efforts led by a special envoy, Steve Witkoff, of course. But as usual, it seems that Trump has gotten out over his skis. So despite his statement, an Israeli source, this is reported by CNN, an Israeli source familiar with the matter said Israel had not approved the new proposal, which revolves around timetables and guarantees for ending the war, the critical sticking points in previous negotiations. So I'm just gonna pause for a second so we can get caught up on all the context, because this has been the situation since the Biden administration. Netanyahu does not want to end the war. And I really get mad at myself every time I call it a war, because how can you even call it a war? They're just annihilating Gaza. Hamas doesn't have, it's not a country with a military, with the kind of military capability that Israel has. The people of Gaza are trapped in that region, in that strip of land. They're just completely being annihilated. It's a genocide, so let's be clear about that. He doesn't want to end the genocide, okay? He knows that the second he does, he's not gonna have an excuse anymore. He has to go testify in his corruption trials. He doesn't want to do that. I think part of the reason why Trump is trying to get the corruption charges against Netanyahu dropped is so he'll finally agree to a ceasefire. How pathetic is that? And by the way, who's the leader here? I thought Donald Trump was like this alpha. I thought he had some pride. I thought he wasn't willing to get dog walked like other previous presidents have been by Israel. I mean, Biden was just totally embarrassed, humiliated on a regular basis by Benjamin Netanyahu, but Trump's allowing the same thing to happen. They don't want an end to the war, okay? And the sticking point isn't Hamas. The sticking point has always been Israel. So I really do take issue with the way that he framed this whole negotiation process in his Truth Social post. Nonetheless, in other words, Israel does not want to end the genocide in Gaza, and a source told CNN that this new version of a ceasefire agreement attempted to take into account Hamas's concerns with the earlier proposal. During the ceasefire, Israeli hostages would be released in exchange for Palestinian prisoners, the source added, who, by the way, are also hostages when you consider the fact that most of them haven't been charged with a crime. They never get to see a judge or undergo a trial. They're just sitting in these Israeli prisons with no charges and no end in sight. So sure, I guess you can call them prisoners, but I like to reserve that word specifically for individuals who are accused of committing an actual crime. Anyway, of the 50 hostages who are still in Gaza, at least 20 of them are believed to still be alive. And as part of the latest proposal, humanitarian aid would once again flow through UN-run channels rather than this just absolutely horrific US-backed Gaza Humanitarian Aid Foundation. These are the humanitarian aid hubs in which Israeli soldiers open fire and shoot and kill desperate Palestinians who are trying to get their hands on some food. And more than 500 Palestinians have been killed while seeking aid since the GHF started operating in late May. Now, Netanyahu is apparently planning to convene his full cabinet on Saturday night to discuss this proposal. I'm sure that it'll be a good faith effort. Hamas, which has been pushing for a permanent ceasefire as opposed to a 60-day pause, has not agreed to the deal either. The group said it was studying the new ceasefire offer received from mediators in Egypt and Qatar. Now, Hamas official Taher al-Nunu said that the militant group was ready and serious regarding reaching an agreement. He said Hamas was ready to accept any initiative that clearly leads to the complete end to the war. They've been saying the same thing for a while now, dating all the way back to the Biden administration. But again, Israel won't agree to that because they don't want an end to the war. Now, a senior Hamas official said in late May that the group is ready to return the hostages in one day. Just we want a guarantee that the war will not, that war will not come again after that. So again, they don't want a temporary pause in fighting. They want this war to end. And I think that that's actually the best option for all parties involved. But a Hamas delegation is expected to meet with Egypt and Qatari mediators in Cairo on Wednesday to discuss the proposal. Trump, meanwhile, is scheduled to meet on Monday with Benjamin Netanyahu, and he told reporters yesterday that he would be very firm in his discussions with Netanyahu, claiming that Bibi wanted to end the war. I don't think so, but here's what Trump said, quote, he wants to, meaning he wants to end the war. I can tell you he wants to. I think we'll have a deal next week. But in his first public remarks since Trump's announcement of this alleged ceasefire deal, Netanyahu made no indication that he intends to accept.
אני מודיע לכם, לא יהיה חמאס, לא יהיה חמאסטן, לא חוזרים לזה, הדבר הזה נגמר. אנחנו נשחרר את כל חטופינו ואנחנו נכריע את החמאס, לא יהיה.
So it's unclear yet whether anything will come of Trump's announcement. It really is reminiscent of all of the, ooh, we're so close to a ceasefire deal reports that we were getting during Biden's administration. At this point, neither side has said that they're compromising on previous demands. So we're right back at square one. There is no indication that anything has changed or that we're anywhere near a ceasefire next week. The only slight indication, though, of some movement toward an end to this war is that a Qatari foreign ministry spokesman told CNN the Israel-Iran agreement had created momentum for the latest talks between Israel and Hamas. But that's it. The suffering people of Gaza desperately hope the deal comes to fruition. Adnan al-Assar, a resident of Khan Yunis, says of Trump, quote, "We hope he is serious like he was serious during the Israeli-Iranian war when he said the war should stop, and it stopped." But some Gazans, not so hopeful.
This is not the first time he has said this. Since the beginning of the war, they've been promising us something like this: release the hostages and we will stop the war. Every time they say the war is ending, they kill us, the death toll rises, and we lose more of our loved ones. If they wanted to end the war, it would have ended a long time ago. This war will not end, but it is a war that will end us.
Sadly, I think he's right. So as much as I want to feel a level of excitement or maybe a little bit of hope that there will be a ceasefire next week, I definitely wouldn't put money on it. I don't think it's gonna happen. That's where my bet is, and it pains me to say that. The war needs to come to an end. It's not a war, it's a genocide. Innocent people are dying. We as Americans are using up our resources to aid and abet this genocide in Gaza. It needs to stop, and it needs to stop now. And it won't stop unless Trump is willing to be as harsh toward the Israeli government as he is toward Hamas or any other party when it comes to these types of agreements. Treating Israel favorably has not worked out well in getting this war to end. So we'll see what happens. But again, I don't have much hope that there will be a ceasefire next week.
Every time you ring the bell below, an angel gets his wings. Totally not true, but it does keep you updated on our live shows. Every time you ring the bell below, an angel gets his wings. Totally not true, but it does keep you updated on our live shows.